to throw some wide angles at y'all. Hey, that is quite wide. Yeah, I can dig that. Hi again, it's me, Tiana. Welcome back to Tiana Marie Writes. Today I want to talk about Dieselpunk and what exactly that is. I've talked about it quite a few times so far in my videos, and I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to put it out there what I mean when I say Dieselpunk. So before we get that far, just want to talk a little bit about where I'm at with my work in progress. First city. When I said I was almost done with my edits, what I didn't realize was that what I really meant to say was I was almost done with my revisions, which is a little different. Like, when I say revisions, I mean I'm editing for consistency in the plot and the characters, making sure there's no glaring holes, making sure I'm not saying in one scene that someone was wearing a blue shirt and then in the next scene they're wearing a purple, and I don't really explain the fact that they switched shirts or things like that. It's very hard to keep track of all those details when you have a world that you've created and your story is over 200,000 words long. I mean, there's ways to keep track of this. I'm not terribly into tracking all of that information. I know how to do a quick word search to look for things because I remember, generally speaking, where I've used them before and how to double tap myself. But some people I know go as far as to make lists of every detail in their book, which is not a bad idea. I just don't feel like making lists. Yeah, that process took me a long time. I'm through with that, and however, I find that when I revise something, sometimes I miss very obvious things like, oh, I totally left out a word there, or that was a wordy sentence. Maybe I should chop that one in half. I've read that it's actually not a bad idea to read your work out loud to yourself and edit it that way. It's amazing what you'll catch when you do that. So I kind of started that already, and I'm thinking 200,000 words. It's not going to be a walk through the park, but I can get it done fairly quickly. I'm just going to set a goal for before the end of the year to have that done. And I think without a doubt I'll get it done before the end of the year. It's just a matter of chipping away at it whenever I get a spare moment. So that's where I'm at with my work in progress Dieselpunk fantasy novel, The Elementalist Rise of Para. Okay, Digger, on to the topic of the day. So, what is Dieselpunk? I'll give you my definition. There are a lot of different definitions out there, but as far as I see it, Dieselpunk is basically in the realm of fiction. Let's put it that way. Dieselpunk is speculative fiction that derives its inspiration from the early 20th century. That can be anything from ideas and theories that were developed during this time, technology, fashion, art movements, any of that stuff can be a source of inspiration for the Dieselpunk aesthetic or subgenre. But what makes it different from, say, alternate history is you're probably applying a more contemporary sensibility or outlook to it as well. For example, you take something basic like a rotary dial telephone and turn it into something that can transport people to another place in time. Like, that is totally not a historic look at telephones, and could definitely be qualified as dieselpunk because rotary telephones were very popular during the diesel era, we'll call it. Again, that's the early 20th century. And a lot of times when you look for a definition on dieselpunk, people will limit it between the two world wars. I say why not just call it even like just the first half of the 20th century and be done with it. That's how I look at it. But someone wants some love and affection. So yeah, that's my general outlook on what dieselpunk is. At least what I mean when I say dieselpunk. Can we just talk for a moment what dieselpunk is not? A lot of times people who have not heard of the term dieselpunk, when they see it, they might actually label it as steampunk because that's one of the closest things there is to dieselpunk, aside from like Tesla punk or something like that, or even atom punk. But it is not steampunk. Let's just make that clear. Steampunk derives its inspiration from a totally different period in history. That alone makes it different in and of itself. Oh look, another cat wants to get love and affection today. Hi Kit Kat. So Kit Kat, what can you tell us about the difference between steampunk and dieselpunk? Yeah, he doesn't really know. So to make it simple, let's just start with the eras of inspiration. Like I said, dieselpunk gets its inspiration from the early 20th century, whereas steampunk derives its inspiration from the Victorian era. They're not too far apart and as far as the timeline of history goes, but there is a difference. After all, in this Victorian era, the Industrial Revolution was just taking place, so there were a lot of technological advancements being made at that time. However, it's not quite as advanced as it was in the 20th century. I mean, that's just naturally how that works out. Another difference would be, well, I mean, just look at the names. Steampunk, steam-powered or steam-propelled technology is a staple of steampunk, whereas in dieselpunk, diesel engines and things that run on diesel fuel, that would be more of a mainstay of the dieselpunk aesthetic. Can we talk about airships? I know when it comes to steampunk, there always seems to be airships involved, which is kind of anachronistic because there's a difference between an aerostat versus an airship or dirigible. An aerostat is something, it's an aircraft that is lighter than air. That means it uses a gas that's lighter than air to make itself lift off the ground, versus a dirigible, which is actually a lighter than aircraft that can be steered. So in the Victorian era, steerable airships didn't actually exist. That didn't come about until the early 1900s. So technically, airships are really more of a dieselpunk thing. However, people like to mix things up, and there's nothing wrong with that, but just understand that historically, there is a difference as far as where these ideas come from. That is the hot air balloon versus a dirigible. Let's move on to some examples of what dieselpunk kind of looks like. So, movies and TV shows. A lot of these that I'm going to mention also come in the form of books and comics. In fact, they might have started out that way, so keep that in mind as well. But one very good example of dieselpunk would be Indiana Jones. I mean, it's set during the 1930s, for the most part. You know, sometimes he's battling the Nazis, but then there's usually some sort of speculative element in that Indy is looking for a lost artifact with mythological powers, if you will. That's a very dieselpunk thing to do. Another example would be The Rocketeer. and his jetpack is very more of a science fiction take on Dieselpunk. It's kind of fun. More modern examples of Dieselpunk would be the first Captain America movie, his origin story, if you will, that took place, you know, during the whole Nazism period. And then you also have the late Wonder Woman that's coming out next year. I think that's during the summer, but she's alive and well during the World War I period, and that is very much grounds for Dieselpunk inspiration. Oh, and we can't forget the TV show Agent Carter. Short-lived as it was, very much Dieselpunk inspired with Howard Stark and his wacky inventions, and that was a lot of fun. And I'm sad to see that one get canceled, but I get it. It wasn't doing as well as they hoped. So those are some examples of movies and TV shows that could be classified as Dieselpunk. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of scratching my leg because I got bit by a mosquito the other day at work, which is really annoying. So yeah, if you see me reaching down, that's probably why. Books and comics, again, a lot of the ones that I mentioned for TV shows and movies could fall under this category as well. There's a book called The Troubleshooter, which kind of mimics the style of noir fiction and has a science fiction bent to it. It's written by Bart Constantine. I think he has a fantastic sense of humor, and he uses the slang of the Diesel era very well. So if you're into noir or even science fiction, you might want to check that one out. There's also Ignition City, which is a graphic novel by Warren Ellis, another one to check out. There's Athena Voltaire. There's so many comic books that have been coming out lately. There's the Jekyll Island comic. There's Skies of Fire. I can't even keep up with it anymore. Yeah, there's a lot more. I'm seeing a lot more Dieselpunk comic books and graphic novels coming out. So definitely want to look into some of those as well if you're interested in Dieselpunk. As far as novels, there's also Airborne and Leviathan. Airborne was written by Kenneth Apple. It follows the story of a boy aboard an airship, and there's a speculative fiction. There's hi Tigger. There are air pirates, I believe, and some fantastical creatures that fly through the air. There's a similar situation in Leviathan, though I think that takes place right around World War I era, if I'm not mistaken, and also has some fantastical creatures. It's a mix of biology and science fiction elements in that one, so definitely a couple more to check out. One day I came across a list of Dieselpunk novels and even graphic novels on Goodreads, and I'll put a link to that below in the description box. That's something you should definitely check out if you want to read more examples of what Dieselpunk looks like. There's also a few video games out. BioShock is probably one of the more notable ones, I think, in my opinion. The first two games, very heavily inspired by the Art Deco movement, and even works by Ayn Rand. Then there's Crimson Skies, which is kind of a airplane shooter video game, which is pretty fun. I've seen LA Noire referred to as a Dieselpunk video game, though I don't know, I don't recall there being much of a speculative element, like something out of the ordinary. I would probably call it more neo-noir, but that's just me. And also Dishonored. Some people are calling Dishonored Dieselpunk, which I'm a little iffy on that one too. It kind of looks on the surface more like Tesla Punk, but I don't know. I think that's up for debate. But if you're interested in that aesthetic, there's definitely those video games I would check out if you're into video games. There's also my work in progress, The Elementalist Rise of Horror, which is very much a Dieselpunk novel. I've got airships, airplanes, a little bit of a focus on radio, and If you know your history, the golden era of radio definitely took place in the early 1900s. I also was inspired by the League of Nations. I have a fictional organization that I simply call the League, and that was inspired by the League of Nations. And again, the aesthetics, in my book, I'm very much inspired by Art Deco, streamlined modern. There's a train called the Silver Zephyr that my protagonist, boy Ramon, gets to travel on at one point in this story. It's very sleek, looks like a silver bullet really, very elongated design. Just a little something fun to play around with there. And film noir, I'm definitely inspired by film noir, and more so, I wouldn't say visual, not the visuals of it, but just the mood, the sense of helplessness and the dark themes. I definitely have some of that in my book as well. So those are examples of Dieselpunk that really stand out to me. There's tons more out there, trust me. In fact, you might even know of some. Have you come across any other movies or video games or books or comics that you think will qualify as Dieselpunk? If so, why don't you share it down below in the comments? I'd love to hear about it. Maybe I haven't heard of it before. I can check it out. And if you're a writer, maybe you're working on something that could be classified as Dieselpunk. If you are, I'd love to hear about it. Thanks for watching today's episode on what is Dieselpunk. I hope you learned something new or got something good out of it. If you want to learn more, you can visit my website at tianmariewhite.com, or you can also subscribe here on YouTube to get more videos about Dieselpunk, fantasy, fiction, speculative fiction, you name it, I'll talk about it. Alright, well I think that's a wrap for today. Thanks again for watching. See you guys later. Say bye, Tigger. Bye-bye. Yeah, that's not really a wave.